Welcome back to So You Really Want to Learn Latin, and today we are looking at questions, how we ask questions in Latin. And we're going to look at three simple ways of turning a sentence in Latin into a question. Now the first way is to use a questioning word such as who or what or where or why or when. Okay. Now in Latin we've got words like quis, which means who, or quid, which means what, or cur, which means why, or ubi, which means where. Okay, now all of those questioning words introduce a question in Latin. So you might have, for example, quis in agro ambulat. Okay. So if you saw a sentence like that, quis in agro ambulat. Well, the word quis is it's a word you learn, but when you see it, and particularly if you notice that there's a question mark at the end, you know you're going into a question. So quis who? Now, quis in agro ambulat, who, you go to your verb, ambulat, is walking. Who is walking, and then in, agro, in the field. Okay, we'll do another one. Cur in agro ambulas. Okay, now you've got cur, which means why. So why, then you look at your verb, ambulas. Now that's second person singular, present tense of ambulo. So why are you walking in agro, in the field? Okay. Now notice how in English we form questions by turning our pronouns and our verbs inside out. So instead of you are walking, we say are you walking? So why are you walking? The word order in English has sort of flipped. That doesn't happen in Latin, obviously. You can't change the word order of the verb because the verb is just a single word. But the word cur at the beginning tells you you're going into a question. Okay, you might have a sentence like ubi laborabatis, no question mark. So ubi means where, laborabatis means you were working, but it's a question, so you're going to turn that word order around. Ubi laborabatis, where were you working? Right? Instead of you were working, it becomes were you working? Okay, so that's how what you might call kind of simple questions work in Latin. They are introduced by a questioning word. A second way is if your question is non-specific. What we've looked at is who or why or where or when or what, those kind of questions. If the question is simply are you working, or are you reading, or will you walk, or have you read, okay, not who or why or when, but just have you, did you, are you, then what we do is we stick the letters ne, so ne, on the end of the first word in the sentence. Now the first word could be a noun. Sometimes it can be the verb. You kind of drag the verb forward to the beginning to put emphasis on it. But either way, it's the first word in the sentence will have ne on the end of it. So you can have a simple sentence like pueri in agrum currunt. Okay, the boys are running into the field. But if you want to make it a question and say, are the boys running into the field? You would just put ne on the end of the first word. So you'd get pueri ne in agrum currunt. are the boys running into the field? Okay, and then the third type of question we're going to look at are ones where there is a degree of expectation as to what the answer will be. Now, these are questions introduced either by none or num. Now, none expects the answer to your question to be yes, and num expects the answer to be no. Okay, now, you might be surprised, the answer might not be yes or no as you thought, but that's the expectation. So, for example, you might say, non rex reginam amat. Okay, question mark. So, it's a question. You can see none, that's a word that introduces a question, but it's a question to which you expect the answer to be yes. So you might say something like, the king does love the queen, doesn't he? You know, you expect the person to say, yeah, he does. So you would have, non rex reginam amat. Surely the king loves the queen, doesn't he? Okay, the king does love the queen, doesn't he? But if you had a sentence where you thought the answer was going to be no, you might have something like, num magister poeros timet. Okay, now num introduces the question, but it's a question to which we expect the answer to be no. So, num magister poeros timet would mean the master does not fear the boys, does he? And we expect the answer to be no, he doesn't. Num magister poeros timet. Surely the master doesn't fear the boys, does he? The master doesn't fear the boys, does he? And we expect the answer to be no. Okay, so that's 3 different ways of doing questions in Latin, all pretty simple. Recognisable because we see a question mark at the end. In many ways, the difficulty is getting the English right, because we have to suddenly remember how we form questions in English with our word order sort of getting turned inside out. So, you know, you just give you one Latin sentence to play with. From here you might have copiasne sagittis et telis superabemus. Okay, so if you had that sentence, copiasne sagittis et telis superabemus. Right, now you know it's a question because you've got that word ne on the end of the first word. You've got a question mark at the end. So you're kind of in question mode. But you still look at your verb first. So, superabemus, we shall overcome. Okay? But it's a question. So it's not we shall, it's shall we. Okay? Now, shall we overcome? You know, just because the very first word in our sentence had net on the end, it doesn't mean that your rules of how you translate Latin sentences go out of the window. So, copias is an accusative plural, and then it's had ne put on the end of it. So, copias, now the Latin word copiae, always found in the plural, which is a bit peculiar, but it means the forces, as in military forces. So, copias is the forces, but they are the object. So, superabemus, shall we overcome, copias, the forces, and then we've got these words, sagittis et telis. Now those are both either dative or ablative plural endings, sagittis et telis. Now, ablative would make sense, with spears and arrows. So, shall we overcome the forces with spears and arrows? Okay, now you could, if you wanted to put a little bit of emphasis on that question, you could change it and say, non copias sagitis et talis superabimus. So that would mean, you know, we shall overcome the forces with spears and arrows, shan't we? You know, we're kind of expecting you all to say, yeah, we shall. Or if you were a bit nervous about the whole situation and thought, blimey, we've only got spears and arrows and they've got machine guns, you might begin it with num. Num copias sagitis et talis superabimus. That would mean we shan't overcome the forces with spears and arrows, shall we? You know, that's not going to happen. Okay, so that's questions for us in Latin. They're easy little chaps, really. Quite good fun. It increases the range of things we can do. Next time we're going to move on and look at the fourth conjugation. That's audio. Now, in Latin, there are 4 main conjugations. There's a 5th one, which I'll talk to you about later. But basically, there are 4. We've done 3. We've done amo, we've done moneo, we've done rego. Next time, we're going to have a little look at audio. Okay, so until then, subscribe to this channel for lessons twice a week. Do leave me a comment below if you need help or advice, and I will see you next time.